This is the Making Noise podcast.
I think something saxophone specific is we tend to move everything too much, especially when it comes to armature and tongue position.
Mm.
There's like kind of two schools of thought on this, where it's like the idea of voicing, and then so it's like Fred Hemke from Northwestern taught didn't really focus on that much. He focused purely on musical expression, so he didn't really instruct like move your tongue this way or that way so much. But then you had Donald Cinta at University of Michigan who did teach voicing, and so there's like those two trains of thought on how to teach the saxophone. And so this is something that I actually had conversations with a lot of my teachers, is how much do you actually instruct to move, because most students will end up moving too much.
Mm.
So the fun thing is that it's really easy to diagnose too if they're moving too much, because you can actually see their chin moving, like the bottom of their chin, because every time you move your tongue, like it moves your bottom of your chin. So it's really easy to diagnose when they're doing too much.
That's wild. It's like a frog.
Yeah, it is. And some students play like that too. So that's always kind of funny.
Interesting. Yeah. So I mean, through your studies, I mean, you've gone through. Um, I don't even know where you did your undergrad in South
South
Carolina.
Carolina. Yeah.
Yeah, and then masters at Bowling Green,
Hmm.
and then now you're at Florida. What has the transition between the different studios been like in regards to, like you said, there's two schools of thought with
Yeah.
embouchure, right? So like, how has that been kind of going between the different programs?
It's very interesting. I mean, I'm really glad. Like my first degree, that was under the Donald Cinta School of Thought, and then both degrees now, since then, have been under Hemke. Like
Mm.
they've both been Hemke students. So I've gotten both perspectives, and I think they both have valid arguments. And I think the general trend is you need to do both, but just not be so extreme.
Right.
Like everyone voices. It's just, do you talk about it, and how much do you talk about it, and how much do you train it, all that kind of stuff. But I think it's been super useful to hear both, because when I came out of my undergrad, I feel like I came out super technically strong, but I wasn't always listening to musical line, and that's not any fault of my teacher. It was just what I was, where I was. And then I got to Bowling Green, and Dr. Sampin didn't really talk about voicing at all. He just talked about musical expression. So that really helped me round out a lot. And then I felt like by now it's mostly just like detail work with Dr. Dybel, and talking about making sure that everything we play is really musical, and fixing those little things where I have tendencies of going too far in either direction.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. I like what you said about kind of trying both things out,
Yeah.
because then you're you're sort of equipping yourself with more resources
Yep.
in regards to finding solutions to potential problems, or yeah, I guess solutions to problems with playing.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. That kind of makes me think a little bit about, because you're talking about going from one school to the next, and the different schools of thought with how to play. Is the whole idea with classical, like student performers, student composers, just anyone studying music in college, is the whole idea of when you go from your bachelor's to your master's, studying with at a new school, like to try to get that perspective, to get a new
Mm,
perspective, I guess.
yeah,
And but then there are some people who kind of just stay in one place and
for
go
sure.
bachelor's, master's, doctorate. you know I
Yeah.
think the point you just mentioned is a good one to to uh, to bring up for that sort of discussion. What sort of things have you kind of recognized that might be a fault in that, or a flaw in that system?
Yeah. One thing to consider when you are doing that is, I mean, a lot of people go through in one school of thought, and that's totally fine. I think that gives you more consistency. One thing that I found it myself now is, now that I have those perspectives, I'm kind of wrestling with like what I want to keep from both. So sometimes it can lead me to being indecisive, I guess, about things.
Mm.
Or, I mean, so it's just interesting having that wider perspective. um, I feel like sometimes can be a hindrance whenever you're trying to make decisions on what you want to do. Like, for instance, I was playing cello transcription for Dr. Dybel recently, and in the first three notes, I was doing something that involved the voicing to get it in tune, but it was sacrificing some of the tone quality of one of my notes. So we literally spent like 30 minutes on three notes of the piece, just deciding what was appropriate, how to make it in tune, all that stuff. And like, it's pretty ridiculous that you can spend that long on three notes, but it's like that's the detail work that you get used to doing, of course, in graduate school.
Right. Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, that's crazy to think about, especially if anyone who watches this that's not a musician or anything, and they're like, you spent that
Yeah.
much time playing 3 notes, like,
Yeah, maybe it wasn't that long, but it was a while, you know.
oh yeah, but that is, I know that is the case. I mean, you know, when I was studying guitar and stuff, I did it in my undergrad, so I never went to the master's level of studying
Yeah.
guitar or anything like that. But just talking to my instructors about how long should I be doing scales, or how long should I be working on like legato exercises and stuff like
Yeah.
that, you know. And it's not really so much like a prescription that you can um, like something you could prescribe, you know,
Yeah,
because obviously every person's going to be different, right?
for sure.
But yeah, I don't know, man. It's it's a weird sort of thing in many ways, you know. Like we spend all this time focusing on this one thing, and then when we go into the performance, and then the performance happens, and it's like, I did it.
Yeah. You do
Like,
it. You all that time in prepping for like 5 minutes of music. Yep.
right, you know. But then
Yeah.
but then we also get so hard on ourselves too in
Yeah.
performance, where if we miss one note, you know, but then it's like, well, you got 99% of it,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. Like, what is something that you think, like you said before, you have like a certain indecisiveness when it comes to figuring out which sort of avenue you should go down to correct something. Do you have a sort of method for that at all, or like, what do you think might be an effective way to, for someone, you know, who might be having the same issue as you with that?
Yeah, I think this was part of the conversation I had with my professor I think it was last week or while ago. I think if you're having trouble with those decisions, in the end, the musical lines should be the one that dictate what decision you make. Like, for instance, when I was doing it without any input, I was sacrificing a little bit of the musical line just to get that note, in tune. But in the end, like, I'm probably going to get the note in tune, but I need to focus on creating that smooth line. So, it's like I will keep it in tune, obviously, but I was changing the tone quality to do it. And that's like a sacrifice that you don't want to make. So I guess for me, it's like making sure that I'm preserving the musical line no matter what I'm doing.
Mm.
That's probably
That's
the most important thing.